we measure a lot of times what students can't do rather than what they can. And we don't ask them what they can do. This is a big, big deal for our schools, and I'm trying not to talk about what we do in our schools, although I'll talk about it a little bit, because our program is very different. Instead of starting with classes and developing interests, we start with students' interests, and they get motivated and engaged to develop their work in classes and in school. We have a learning plan for every student. We have advisory groups that are significant advisories, where you meet 2-3 times a day, where your advisor knows your parents, and if you're homeless, knows an adult advocate outside of school. Students twice a week select mentors that they go out and want to learn from, non-job specific, sometimes job specific, that engage them in learning. Our advisors go out and wrap the academics around it. 3 days a week, they're back. They do travel experiences. And I mean far, I mean China, Africa. We raise the money, we figure it out. And we have about 50 of these schools in the United States and another 50 overseas. And we've done them in places all over. We got a lot of proof points. We've done them for all kinds of costs. We've learned a lot doing this. We made a lot of mistakes, but we figured out a lot of things. And so, hopefully this works. No, it doesn't. So I'm going to need the next slide. You could just have to hit the... Ah, there we go. All right. So, believe it or not, and I put this slide in here because Dr. Q yesterday, that's me. All right, you don't see that's me. You see this bald-headed old kind of guy. But when I think of me, that's me there, and my hair is down to here, and I'm at Woodstock. All right? And that's me down there. Well, luckily, thanks to Facebook, people who are old friends who are still alive who are sending me pictures of me. Thank you very much, right? But the story is that when I listened to your stories yesterday, we all have histories. And Dr. Q and all doctors are trained that the most important part of the examination is the patient's history. A lot of times they only have 17 minutes to figure that out because as he was complaining and as we complain, we want better, faster, cheaper in education and in medicine. And I'm not sure that that's right. I don't think we can do it cheaper. Our students already have less. Less is not more. Only sometimes is less more. More is more a lot of the time. And we got to figure out how to do that. So I bring this up because this digital technology can develop relationships. It also has the power not to, and I'm going to show you a little video. This went around the internet. So I'll stop it there. That went around the internet because it was supposed to be somebody. Anybody want to guess who that is? If you're a jazz person, rock and roll person, can somebody take a guess? Oscar Peterson, no. Little Richard. That went around the internet as Little Richard. And thousands of people believe that's Little Richard. So a couple of people who are real jazz people like me, and you don't hit a piano like that, by the way. No, but you hit that piano banging on it like that, people go, ouch, you know, if you're a real jazz guy. Anyhow, a few of us got on the internet on that blog, and we said, I know that's Van Johnson. Little Richard wasn't alive then. That's not Little Richard. So a few of us had a disclaimer going around. Finally figured out who it was. This is the problem with the internet. Unless you go deep, you're not going to if you really want to know, and that could have went at that superficial level forever, that conversation. But unless you really want to know, and that's what our students want to do. They really want to know when they want to get engaged and get better at things. And we don't give them the time sometimes. You're not going to know that. That's a guy named Frank Johnson. He was a novelty act, played with Count Basie. Some of the child labor laws in the United States happened because of Frank Johnson. He's from Detroit. He's still alive. He's in his 80s. As good as Frank Johnson is on the piano, that's not what he wanted to do. Frank Johnson, believe it or not, he was taken out of school. He wanted to go to school. His parents listened to him, and this is the power of parents. He went to school. He got a PhD in psychology. And he's a professor at, not the University of Detroit, but the public university in Detroit now. The name is slipping by me. He saw this video, and he reintroduced himself into it as an act. So in his 80s now, he's now a jazz man playing piano. We change all the time, all right? And there's a guy who's a neurologist who was also at UCFF and was also at Stanford. He's a very close friend of mine. He wrote a book called The Hand. And The Hand book is about the mind speaks to the hand as much as the hand speaks to the mind. And we bifurcate those pieces out in schools, and I'm going to talk about that a lot today. It's really about the development of the self. Knock, knock, who's there? Our young people have tremendous capacities. And what they found out, there's a guy named Benjamin Bloom, you know him from Bloom's Taxonomy. He wrote a book and did research on hundreds of professions. He found out who was in the top of their field, and he studied them with a woman named Lauren Sosniak. What they found out were three things that these people had. Supportive parents and adults in their life, a little bit of talent. They weren't prodigies. A little bit of talent that somebody from the outside, and if you listened to your stories yesterday, you heard this, and you heard this from Dr. Q, somebody encouraged them to continue, and they did continue with the support of their parents, and they developed and had a technique mentor that took them to the next step on their way to mastery. Lauren Sosniak did the research and found that schools have almost no capacity to really develop talented young people, that it happens on the outside. And that's why one of the reasons why we have our schools, because that part of the content is not connected to school. And it's very, very easy to do, but you have to change the structure of school. So, but if I'm not a senior collateral analyst for a high-volume global marketing corporation, who am I? Who are we really? That's the knock-knock piece. If Frank, that little piano player, became a pianist, somewhere along the line we know people have a train wreck because all of a sudden they're banging into, that's not who I am. That's not what I want to be. So even if you have great talents in something, you still have to make serious decisions and not be pushed, or else things happen to you. You break. This is a student at our school, Krishna. This is a true story. His parents are from Cambodia. I was doing a professional development piece on project-based learning to about 150 staff at LAUSD, and I was working with one of our principals from Oakland. And she was on Facebook, and Krishna had just come back from Vietnam on a school trip in the summertime. He just landed in LAX. And she found out and said, can you come over to our meeting? Sure. He came over, and he told his story. He went to visit. Nobody from his family had ever been back. He went to visit his family. They were growing these very, very hot peppers. They're hot pepper farmers. And he is interested in videography and movie making. As a matter of fact, he has a Vietnamese filmmaker he's apprenticed to and interning with in Oakland. Krishna comes back. There he is, talking to everybody. off the top of his head, because our students, if you have it inside of you, you can talk about it. We have it as know and be able to do. It's also do and then be able to know. So you have to get your hands dirty. You have to connect with adults in the outside world. You have to be supported by not just the teachers in your schools, but also by people and organizations from the outside, and they need connections, or else people fall through the cracks, fall apart, and leave school and drop out. That's a powerful message about the work that we do. And there's research on this. There's a guy named Bill Sedlacek, there's a guy named Sackett, there's other people, Conley. They have these things called non-cognitive dimensions. They studied graduates of college who graduate in 4 years across race, class, and gender. And aside from a GPA and an SAT score, because there's a range that you can have across the different colleges and varieties you go to, if you have these 8 things, you can keep your life together. And those are, have somebody who's a go-to person in your life. Do you belong to an organization outside of school? Do you have a positive self-concept? How do you deal with the isms in your life? These are very, very simple to remember. Every teacher in the United States could always have these in their pocket and pull them out with students whenever they want. If schools assessed them and got them internalized inside of students, that graduation rate in college, which is horrendous, we send the 100% of the students that we send that are low-income minority to colleges in the United States, they have an 11% graduation rate by age 29 of that cohort of students. So where are we sending them and what's going on? Our students are ready. Are the colleges ready? We started our own college at Big Picture. We have the college going in Providence, Manchester, New Hampshire, and New Orleans right now, because we feel that there's really something disconnected. Sometimes we say the future is here, only some of us are living in it. Anybody know what that is? It's a garage. It's a famous garage. It's a historical landmark. It's where Hewlett and Packard started after they left Stanford. Look at Bill Gates. Look at Steve Jobs. Look at Michael Dell. They all left when the pull of their passion is so great, even though they're at good schools. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. They leave. I was watching the Mark Twain Awards, who was a dropout and arguably one of our greatest wordsmiths, and he left school. Well, he had to have something to write about, so he had all these types of trades, but they were honoring Bill Cosby that night. Guess what? Bill Cosby left school, dropped out. So the next show, I was in my hotel room because I do a lot of traveling all the time. I'm on the road almost all the time. They did last year's, which was George Carlin. Guess what? He dropped out. So then I looked it up because I got curious. Whoopi Goldberg, dropout. Carl Reiner, dropout. These are all people who won the awards. Jonathan Winters, dropout. Everybody's dropping out of school. How come the thing that we do the best around the literacy in the word, we can't keep those people inside of school? We don't have the right connections to do that, but we think we can do that. This is really, really simple to tap into the interests of students and what they're passionate about. Notice I say interests, not just one. Don't want to narrow. As they develop interests and get better and better at the things that they love to do, more develop. It was no coincidence, in my mind, and I'd like to talk to Dr. Q about that, that when he talked about tomato picking mechanical machine, and he was completely body and mind in that space, and he gets that same zone feeling from being at a surgery, that's no mistake. That's who he is. He's wired for that. And we're all wired for these kinds of things. What we're not wired for very well is to sit like you're doing and not have anything in your hands or talking to anybody, and I apologize for that. This is a young fella from 1935. A friend of mine's uncle took this picture. He's an incredible photographer. 12 years old. 12 years old, and he was scheduled to go to the 1936 Olympics. He refused because it was in Germany and what was going on there. Interesting that a 12-year-old with that kind of talent, and they do, And they have more than that. By the age of 3, all of us are already selecting objects of our interests and saying to somebody who's older, an adult, saying, show me how to do this. Show me how to learn. I want to learn from you. They're selecting. We are wired for this. And all of your examples were one-on-one. And so were Dr. Q's. Where are our one-on-one relationships and pieces that are going on in a school each and every day? And you can do this. This is not difficult to do. These are young people. That girl up there, she broke the circumnavigation world record sailing before she was 17 years old. They wouldn't give her the record because you have to be 18 to hold it. What did she do when she got back? One of the first things she did, because we have schools in Australia, so I know these stories. She said to them, they said, well, what do you want to do when you get back? She says, I can't wait to take my driving test. All right? These young people, and to circumnavigate the world, this discipline, the academics, everything being put together just like Dr. Q. What credit did she get for doing that in school? She made history. Okay. Lance Armstrong, same thing. Breaking world records at 18 years old, touring the world, representing the United States. You know what his school said to him? You weren't in a seat. We can't give you credit. He left. That fellow there, Jordan Romero, he was sitting in a 5th grade class looking at the tallest peaks on a map, and he says, I want to climb every one of them. What would happen if he said that to his teacher? She'd say, maybe, that's nice, but we're doing math right now. That's a nice little story. He said it to his dad. His dad says, let's get started. He's climbed the tallest peak on every continent. He's 15 years old now, or 16, I believe. His father was interviewed on the Today Show with him, or one of them Today Show type shows. And the interviewer said, aren't you putting your child in harm's way? He says, well, maybe so, but it's a calculated risk. What about the 2 million people, parents, who take their children to McDonald's every morning and fill them up with sugar, fat, and salt? Isn't that a risk? That girl there is 15 years old. She's from the Netherlands. We have schools in the Netherlands. She tried to break the circumnavigation world. Solo. They do this solo. She failed. She didn't make it. It's all right. Like yesterday. You got to learn from your mistakes. Trial and insight. In school, there's no trial and insight. AF. You fail, you fail. You fail, somebody's telling you you're not smart. This is a second chance system, but it doesn't feel that way. And it's great that it's a second chance system, because all of us have taken up those second chances. And yet our students really don't understand that. And there really are things in their lives. You mentioned one event, and I know a little different. I know it's never one event. It's never one reason why students drop out. It's never one reason why you don't feel smart. It's a combination and a series of things. And it sometimes isn't the most dramatic. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And students leave, or they get disengaged, or they're compliant. I'm finishing up a book now, and it's about leaving to learn. And that's what our schools do. In other words, you have to leave school to learn, and schools have to take advantage of those outside experiences and credit them. This is not difficult to do. You just have to ask, and you have to support it, and get engaged so students get their academics through those experiences and get the credits for it. Big deal that they don't, because then they leave. So this is a student. He was 13 years old. This is a STEM example, and I can give you lots of STEM examples. His name is Aidan Dwyer, who's front page news in the Wall Street Journal a week ago. He won the Natural History Museum Naturalist Award. They give out to about 10 students around the country. He was walking in the woods with his parents. He had a eureka moment. He said, if the leaves on the trees are patterned in a certain way, maybe our solar collectors should be patterned like leaves on a tree. He went ahead and found out, discovered for himself Fibonacci numbers, and the rest is kind of history. He started welding. He put a little tree together with those leaves. All of a sudden, he's got a patent going. All of a sudden, scientists start paying attention to him. All of a sudden, they start criticizing him. As a 13-year-old, these adults start criticizing him. Heavy, heavy duty, because he made a mistake in one of his formulas around power. And his response was, "That's all right. I'll fix it. No big deal. I'm going to keep on trying." What did the school have to do with that? Was the school doing this? Did the school give him credit? No. Every single one. You can go on the Natural History Museum webpage, do it yourself, take a look at the 10 winners. One of them mentions that there was a connection back to school. All of them mention, and I'm not making this up, all of them mention a connection to the outside and almost always a connection to an adult and almost always their parents. How come we can't align these things? Why can't we give credit? We do in our schools. We have schools in California. We went to the UC system, and excuse me, but I'm a Brooklyn guy, so I'm a little bit more, what seems pushy to you is not pushy to me at all. So the UC called us in, the University of California system, and said, "We hear you're going to do schools here, that's great. But we have these A through G course requirements, and we want to change our system to get in more low-income minority students. And we need you to develop something that allows you to do A through G in a non-sequential way and giving credit for students, not just in the classroom but outside." I said, "Well, I got a dirty little secret for you. If you don't accept our kids, I know all the private colleges out there that will. And your mission says to serve those who are least served. I don't know if you're exactly doing that. I'm looking up on the wall." And they said, no, we really want you to do that." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm from Brooklyn, and it's a little different there." And they said, "Well, you do the 700 pages later, we developed a matrix that all of our schools use. We got money from the Stewart Foundation and from the Euler Foundation to take those matrices and move them out to districts all over California. So students can get credit for those things because the UC wants this to happen." Now, we don't look at our students just by quarter to quarter. On a learning plan, every student has a learning plan. Those learning plans are reviewed by parents, students, teachers, mentors, advisors. We look at growth over time. Years in high school, middle school, we have pre-K to college. But not all, most of our schools are high school. We follow our students out past high school. We're doing longitudinal studies of our students. And we have some really interesting results. And we do them for two reasons. One, we don't just let our students go. We support them after they leave. We're part of the support system. And we think that the system has to change to do that because the colleges don't know how to take. And if you've been to college, you know. They can be very alienating and isolating places, especially for students who are first people in their families to go to school. Not very friendly a lot of the times, and you feel different. The other part to that is that we want to see, we want to support our students. We also want to show that the things that they're doing at our schools make a difference, like these non-cognitive dimensions, and like getting connected to people in your community to develop and build social capital. In Oakland, where we have a very, very nice school of ours, the mayor asked our internship, our Learning Through Interest coordinator, to get every young person in the city of Oakland a mentor around their interests, not around just teaching them to read or do math, which the mentors sometimes don't know how to teach. And we put them in situations, but they know how to build, and they know how to develop a business, and they know how to do art, but we don't ask them to do what they're good at. We ask them to do these other things sometimes. So in Oakland, when we have that school, we looked also at data from 18 to 24-year-olds. 46% of the youth in Oakland are unemployed. We looked at our youth. High 90s of employment. and or going to school. Why? And it's the same students. We're not a creaming place. As a matter of fact, we're the opposite. We take the students who are not doing well in school and have left. Why is there a difference? Well, some of the reason is they're connected to their advisors still in the school. Other reasons are they built social capital out there. They know there's people who have the same interest as they do now because of our school that they've made those connections to, that they can get work that they really want to do, not that they don't want to do. Students want to work. Students have that capacity. They do it all the time. They're helping their families. They're figuring things out. They just need the connections to those places. And schools can do that. So that's Aiden. This is who we are a little bit. We do personalized learning plans. We do interest-based learning and project-based learning. It's really interest-based. We do blended learning when it's good, not when it's not good. We use a program called Better At. How do you get better at things? There was a famous anthropologist. He said, man wants to do the things that he likes to do, and he wants to do them better. Better and better. Practice. When do we have time in schools to practice? Really practice. Disciplined practice around the things that we want to get better at. We do performance assessments. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. That means you get credit for doing, not just writing, not just speaking. Can you do it? It's like the fighter in the ring. And one guy looks at him who's, doing a review and says, he looks pretty good in the ring, but can he pass the written test? All right? All right? This is the real world. What we know out there and what we tell students and what businesses tell us, I can tell you, is out of kilter. It needs a lot of alignment. I go to places. I went into a factory in Cleveland. This guy says, this is the most important guy at our place. He's on a computer. I said, why? And I'm with the head of career and technical education for the state. I'm with the CEO of a business who makes fasteners. I'm with the head school people in Cleveland. I said, why is this young guy so important? He says, because when he looks at 2 dimensions, he can see in 3. I said, where does it say that on his job description? They go, nowhere. I said, where are you testing for that in school? They say, nowhere. I said, I'm gone. You guys figure this out. This happens all the time. We don't have the descriptions aligned with what we're teaching. And not only that, if you ask those CEOs, maybe there's some in here, what are the jobs going to be in 3 years? They go, are you kidding? I don't know. Things are changing too fast. Well, we know we have to teach students how to think critically and problem solve. I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. Nobody can teach you that. You do it anyway. You figure out problems and solve them. We're human beings. We're wired to deal with uncertainty. We got to figure out how to cross that street. That's what we like to do. We got to stay out of danger. We know when to get to choke and when to panic, when to run and when to think. And if you don't get those things right, you're going to choke when you should be panicking, and panicking when you should be choking. And that's what happens. You start second-guessing yourself because your sensory system is very, very powerful and overlooked a lot of times in schools. It's not assessed. So here's a few of our students. Shondell is a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design, and I have permissions to talk about their lives. Her mom was a crack addict. Her older sister graduated our school in our first class. She went to Brown. Neither one of her parents graduated high school. Her dad was in prison. There she is with her mentor in photography. She graduated RISD with a degree in furniture making, and that's furniture making doesn't mean furniture making on the shop floor, although I would say that that's as powerful as what she was learning in school, but she has a degree now, and nobody else did, and that was a big deal. Dan got a Gates Scholarship, and by the way, the Gates Millennium Scholars uses Sedlacek's non-cognitive dimensions to screen the students who get the scholarship. They look at GPA, they look at SAT, ACT scores, and they use those non-cognitive dimensions. That's a dirty little secret. 96% of those students with a full ride graduate college in 4 years. And Sedlacek, the guy who invented it, says, forget the GPA and forget the SAT. Just take students based on that. And you'll see, you'll get those kinds of results. They're screened for that. Daniel came in, his mom had passed away, his dad came over to me, I was the principal of the school at the time, said, I don't care what happens, you make sure Daniel gets to college. Daniel, what do you like? He likes sharks. We couldn't get him to a shark place where we were in South Providence, which is the toughest place in a tough city. So we got him to a fish hatchery where he developed a lifelong relationship, his life, with this mentor who was at the hatchery, who was also teaching at the community college. And for Daniel, that wasn't enough. He figured out a way to get to Boston 2 days a week. He became an explainer of the sharks, and that wasn't enough. He took snorkeling and scuba diving, and he started diving in with the sharks. He got a Gates Scholarship to the College of the Atlantic. He's a marine biologist. Jennifer is at the high-risk prenatal care unit of Rhode Island Hospital. There she is. The nursing students come in, they think she's a nurse. She's 16 years old. Jennifer's now 30 and a nurse. I'm getting old. So we had our 15-year reunion, and we've been in existence now 18 years at the school in Providence, which is an interesting school facilities-wise to see, but we don't have time to talk about that now. Debbie is her mentor. She was in that unit, and I'll just tell you this quick story, and she said, the women who come in here who are poor don't get the same care as the women coming in here who are wealthy. As a matter of fact, they stay 2 weeks, and these women leave in a day. She says, that's not fair. That's how a young person thinks. That's not fair. So she did her project on researching the insurance and the healthcare system and what the hospital was doing it, and presented it to the board of the hospital. Our students win or get credit for things that they do. They've started nonprofits, they started entrepreneurial ventures. They rang the bell at Wall Street a month ago, 2 months ago, 2 of our students, for their entrepreneurial venture that they just did. We have the only entrepreneurial center that's a facility on the campus of a high school. So this is one of our students, Carlos. He was one of my students. He's now an advisor. He was asked just to come up for a second.
My name is Carlos Ramirez. I graduated in 2001. And I was going to speak about being yourself, but I can tie it also in with creating a culture. So you're going to have many jobs in your lifetime. The most important one is being yourself. No one can be you for you. If I try to be you, I'm going to fail. And when we try to be other people, we fail in so many different ways. So this is a quick journey of being me and not being me. When I wasn't being me, I cut class in my first 2 weeks at the Met and hung out with the wrong people. But when I was being me, I excelled and I did well in school. When I wasn't being me, I disrespected the Met in the worst way through the valedictorian speech. But when I was being me, I bounced back and was on the dean's list my first semester of URI, University of Rhode. When I was not being me, I was in bad company, and I decided to conspire to rob a pharmacy, which landed me 2 years in prison. Yeah. But when I was being me, in that prison, I made sure I continued my school, graduated with honors, came out, and also graduated my master's program with honors. When I was being me, thank you. Since then, I continue to be me. I married my beautiful wife, have 2 children, have a dog, and I don't want the picket fence. That's being me. I am also a minister. I've been able to travel around the world, including when Haiti was hit with that terrible storm, and we were able to lend a hand. And being me allows me to be here before you all, and now as an advisor giving back. Thank you.
So these stories and life goes up and down. Having people who he was connected with when things went bad made a big difference. His wife is going to be a principal at our school. Cynthia, she graduated our school as well. This is Lindsay. She's at our school now. She's a Narragansett Indian. She couldn't handle school where she was. She has what they say is ADD, although we don't see the ADD. She's a very active young woman. She does blanket dancing. She gets credit for it. Her academics are very, very high now. They were not when she was at her other high school. Really, really, just another story. All of a sudden, students are listened to around their interests, who they are, simple as they are, and something is done about it. And that makes the difference. And they get credited for it. So, we came up with these 10 essentials for learning. This is the real fake continuum. A real fake continuum, I know we got off track on the time. Okay. I'll just do a few more things and I'll stop. Real fake is kind of people who go to Venice and they go, Venice is terrible. It's dirty, filthy, I don't like it. They don't realize that Venice has been rebuilt 13 times in its history. So what's the real Venice? They go to the Bellagio or the Venetian in Las Vegas and they go, I like this. This is Venice. It's clean. It's safe. I like this. This is my experience of Venice. So one's real, one's fake. But the fake is more real to them than the real is, and the real is also fake. So, relationships. Do my teachers care about me and my interests? Do I find what the school is teaching to be relevant? And these are meters you can use. Will I be able to choose what, when, and how I will learn? Do I feel sufficiently challenged in doing this learning and work? Will I have an opportunity to engage in serious practice of those skills I wish to learn? Will I have opportunities to explore and to make mistakes without being chastised for failing? Will the learning and work I do be regarded as significant out of school? Will I have opportunities to apply what I am learning in real-world situations? Will there be sufficient time for me to learn at my own pace? And can I pursue my learning out of the standard sequence? The more those questions get answered by students that they're doing those things inside of their schools, the more they're engaged, motivated, and staying. These are some things I'm going to have to go quickly because we ran out of a little bit of time. And I'll just show you, I'll end with this little piece. I had a lot more to show you, but it's just not there. So this is the logical brain. That's school. Turn the page. Keep going. No time to say I'm stuck when you're really stuck. And you may get stuck and you got to go through the wall. But we work very differently. We work in swirls and spirals, back and forth. We forget something, have to relearn it. That's what we do as human beings. So our system is off. And we got to get it in line. Out of school, this is how you learn. In school, the logical, rational brain takes over, and it's all text-based for the most part. These are inventions and devices done by people who are tinkerers. I'm a big tinkerer. I'm involved in the maker movement and making, playing, and designing and bringing that into schools. I'll just show you two quick videos. This is one that puts the whole thing together. Art and science.
Blown us to a windswept beach in Holland. Because this is home to an incredible creature that only needs a slight breeze to spring into life.
My name is Theo Johnson. We're here in Ekenburg in Holland, where I work every day. And here I try to make new forms of life, which keep me busy 24 hours a day. And I want to put us out on the beaches where they can live in the future. And they don't have to eat because they get their energy from the wind.
Theo's been making his creatures for over 20 years, and he's evolving such clever designs that one day he hopes they'll be able to leave home and to live permanently in the Dutch sand dunes. Incredibly, his animal-like creatures are only made from PVC. Getting them to walk smoothly was the first step, but his animals still needed their creator to get them going. He had to pull his first creatures up into the wind before they could scuttle back up the beach. But Theo didn't want to always have to pull his offspring up the beach, so the next generation got a propeller. And then, to give them more running power, he borrowed nature's best wind design ever and gave them wings. Through hours of experimenting and trial and error, Theo's designs are becoming more and more independent.
What I found about this experience of making new forms of life is that you discover all the problems which the real creator must have had creating this world. These animals will survive on their own, just like you raise your children and then there comes a day that you can kick them out of the door and that they live their own lives. And hopefully at the end of my life they will survive a lot better than they do now. Then I could die quietly knowing that I will live on for the beaches.
So students ask that all the time. Well, is this alive? And we as adults say, no, that's not alive. And they say, but you told me that if something moves, it's alive. You told me, well, there's a rock, and I just smashed it and made two rocks. You said if it reproduces, it's alive. Well, he spent 20 years of his life getting better and better and better, making mistakes after mistake after mistake, and doing that, and he lives in the Netherlands. And that's what he does. Interesting. So, what's deeper? And this is a good question because there's codes out there, and if you know the code, it's not magic anymore. The code could be numeracy, the code could be literacy, the code could be, how do you make this table? Those are all legitimate, highly dignified codes that we only count the literacy and numeracy at sometimes very superficial levels, not very deep. So, what's really running the show? Is the egg running the show, or is the chicken running the show? Is the chicken just another way of an egg making another egg? That's where all the information is, inside the egg. So it's simple the way a Rembrandt drawing is simple. It does a lot with a little. It does a lot with a little. Not less is more. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of learning inside those pictures. Unbelievable amounts. This is a book, History of the World Through 100 Objects. I recommend that you get it. That's an astrolabe. He takes the executive director of the British Museum takes 100 objects, no text, and tells a history of the world. Unbelievable how interconnected we all are. And it tells a different history of the world and who we are as human beings. Not the book version, not the royal version. Very, very different, very powerful. So, is this science or is this art? Or both? I'll talk through this a little bit. Every one of those birds, this is a science experiment. There's also art. You can see the art there. You can see what artists looked at before they had any kind of electronics. But those birds aren't hitting each other. How come? Just like bees, they're looking in 7 different directions at all times. And there's a hawk that goes in through them, and he can't get them either. You'll see him dispersing the ellipses and so, we're wired on this. Bees do the same exact thing, they found out. It's one of those numbers. All right, I won't show it too much, and I'm going to end with just showing you this. So I'll say, here's Mark. This guy is a magician friend of ours. I work with craftspeople, tradespeople, doctors, neurologists, magicians. I bring them all together to get our schools better. In schools today, there is a complex lack of balance between cognitive and sensory. You need both. We lost the sensory motor way of working, so reason seems more real. But reason distorts everything that is not reason. Dr. Q knows that. His whole body is in it. Here's my friend, Washor. In sequence, randomly on the screen. Here's her sister. How'd she do that? She cracked the code. It's all about code cracking. Information is information. You got to get knowledge out of it, and then you get wisdom out of it. So, if humans are taught to do mathematics as if its purpose was algorithmic exhibitionism, and we have to ask that of ourselves critically, most of us would never get much further than the chimps do. So I leave that with you, that we're more than that. That you have to pay attention to who every student is and what they're telling you their interests are, and engage adults out in the community around those interests, and there's ways of doing that. For every school. This is not difficult to do. It just takes a little bit of organization. So thank you very much, and have a great day on your future in your schools.